Newscast Corridor. It's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robyn Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. Today on the show, two Michigan families living two versions of the same story. One man, detained for months, is finally released.
Another, a former DACA recipient with deep roots in Michigan, is now behind bars in an ICE facility hours from home.
Together, their stories capture something bigger: the widening gap between intention and impact in America's immigration system.
Then, in our second hour, we widen the lens. What policies actually work for Black Michiganders? A new report surfaces 29 recommendations shaped by residents themselves.
And later, a celebration of Detroit creativity. The East Side boutique, named one of the nation's best, will be featured in the second hour.
We begin with the story of a Michigan father and community leader who spent months in immigration detention, despite having lived here nearly his entire life. His case unfolded as aggressive immigration enforcement has intensified nationwide. As of early this month, more than 200,000 people had been arrested by ICE agents, including about 75,000 with no criminal record at all. Liu Yang doesn't technically fit into this context, but his case is close. He was born in a Thai refugee camp after his family fled Laos. The Hmong refugee has lived in Michigan since he was 8 months old. While he is here legally, Yang previously had a 1997 criminal conviction, which was expunged in Michigan, but isn't recognized by federal immigration law. That resulted in ICE agents arresting Yang in July at his work. He was in prison until last week when he was released with the help of Michigan Republican Congressman Tom Barrett. Why did Congressmember Barrett help Liu Yang get free? And what was the process like for getting someone out of ICE detention? To discuss this now, we have the congressman here with us. Congressman Barrett, thanks for joining me on the Metro.
Thank you. And ladies, Merry Christmas, and thank you for having me on today.
Happy holidays to you. You've said that as soon as you heard of Yang's arrest, you had your staff aggressively seek more information. Why were you so interested in his case, Congressman?
Yeah, I was very interested. We had first heard about it kind of simultaneously through some of the early reporting of what had happened, some of the statements that Liu's family had made. And then I was also contacted by a couple of the state lawmakers in Michigan that were familiar with the case. And as I heard about it, often you hear something and there's more to the story that hasn't been revealed yet that you have to kind of wait to understand. And I wanted to make sure that we knew exactly what the conditions and circumstances were. And so my staff started, contacting federal authorities, working with Liu's family, and really trying to get to the bottom of every part of the story and the timeline as to what had happened.
And one part of the story that's quite salient is that Liu Yang is not an undocumented immigrant. So to the best of your knowledge, why do you think Liu was detained by ICE in the first place?
You're exactly right. And that was a compelling factor for me. I do believe that we need robust and fair, but firm enforcement of our immigration law. And if people have violated the immigration law, I think that we need to hold them accountable for that behavior. But Liu Yang is not and never has been an illegal immigrant in our country. And that was a very compelling circumstance for me, and one that I wanted to get more involved in as I learned more about his case. As you pointed out in your introduction, he had a long dormant criminal conviction from the 1990s when he was a teenager. He was involved with, kind of hanging out with the wrong crowd, and he was present but not really actively participating in an attempted home invasion when he was a teenager. Was convicted of that and spent some months in jail as a result, and came out and never had any other criminal interaction since. He's gone on to have 6 kids, married an American citizen. They have 6 kids together. They live in St. John's, in the community that I represent in Congress. And every person that I spoke to as we did our due diligence on this case really attested to his character and who he is. And that, kind of total circumstance, starting mostly with the fact that he's not illegally in the country really compelled me to do what I could to try and make sure that he was released from custody and reunited with his family. I just felt that a long dormant criminal conviction from a time when he was a teenager has, been so long ago that it has been expunged entirely by the state of Michigan, really, I felt necessitated my involvement. Because to me, the ICE process, if they look at, a criminal conviction and as it stands, without giving the broader context of the circumstances in which it occurred, the age of the person at the time and the, number of decades that have passed since, I felt really demanded a little bit of a human interaction to have a reasonable person look at this and understand that this is not in the furtherance of our country's interest to deport
Congressman,
someone like Liu Yang.
That's a very good point, but I want to note as well that despite everyone's best intentions in trying to get Liu Yang released, this was a very challenging journey. I mean, even after Governor Gretchen Whitmer pardoned Liu Yang, he was still very firmly in ICE custody. And at one point, he was on an aircraft, a supposed deportation flight. So it sounds like a lot of things had to happen in order to free him. Is that right?
Yeah, a lot did have to, and that's why I was so involved in this case, because I felt like as members of Congress, we often have a lot of constituent work that we do. Something as kind of routine and benign as, somebody's tax return is delayed, and we got to figure out where the delay is in the process and get a little bit involved. And that's routine work that we do every single day. Sometimes they're more complicated. You have more, a veteran's claim that maybe is in dispute that you have to accumulate records for. But this was a case that I felt really demanded my direct engagement and intervention because of the urgency of the matter and because of the risk of, really severe and significant harm to him and his family if he had been deported back to Asia into, basically a community. They were going to send him back to Laos where his actual citizenship originates from.
But he is
But
stateless.
as you pointed out, he came here as an infant. It would have not served either his interests, his family's interests, or the broader interests of the United States government. And that, to me, I felt compelled me to take a heavier role in this, different than the more routine cases that members of Congress often deal with representing their constituents with federal agencies.
This is the Metro on WDET. I'm Robyn Vincent. My guest is Michigan Republican Congressman Tom Barrett. We're discussing the release of Liu Yang from ICE detention, which Congressmember Barrett facilitated. I'm wondering, Congressman, have you gotten any flack from President Trump because of your decision? I mean, this does somewhat fly in the face of the hard-line stance that many Republicans are taking when it comes to immigration enforcement.
Well, I think, as I pointed out before, I think we can both enforce immigration law in a fair way that is firm in its application, humane in how we treat people, but doesn't violate our underlying immigration laws. And again, I thought that this case really exemplified something that we should be doing in a thoughtful way and doing it in the right way. And I'm really thankful that Lou has been reunited with his family. I was able to be there as he was reconnected with his family, as he was released from custody. And it was something that I was very, just proud and humbled to be a part of in the role that we had to play in that. As far as my relationship with the White House, that actually was what got this ultimately done and over the finish line. Was I was able to advocate within the administration for why I felt like Lou's case was different than other immigration enforcement cases that have been pending and that have been happening. And as I pointed out to them, the fact that he is not and has never been in the country illegally, I felt was really a compelling reason to give this a different evaluation criteria. I think the automated nature of the fact that he had a conviction, there was a long dormant removal order that was put into effect back in the 1990s, about 30 years ago after his criminal conviction. At the time, we didn't have diplomatic relationships with Laos to send people back. So he was given, annual or periodic, approvals to stay in the country. And that had been progressing for nearly 30 years until geopolitical circumstances change and all of a sudden deportations to Laos are reauthorized. and he's just kind of caught in that crossfire.
Congressman,
and I think there are
we're running out of time here, and so I do want to get to a few other things. Forgive me for jumping in, but something I want to talk about is some of the other folks who are U.S. citizens who have been ensnared in the immigration system under this more aggressive enforcement. Over 170 U.S. citizens have been held by immigration agents. That's according to an October report published by ProPublica. Are you working with other members of Congress or the White House to ensure that no U.S. citizens are detained by ICE?
Well, I certainly feel, obviously, that immigration law needs to be enforced, but no, we don't. We shouldn't be detaining or removing American citizens, and there's a process by which we follow to ensure that shouldn't happen. There's never going to be a perfect application of that, no different than occasionally people are arrested in the pursuit of law enforcement and later released as we determine that they're not, affiliated or associated with a particular crime that they may be suspected of. We want to minimize that to the extent that we can, but we also have to bear in mind that we have had millions, plural, some estimates more than 10 or even 15 million people that illegally entered the country just in the last administration alone. And we can't ignore the fact that those people have violated immigration law, and we need to do the hard work of removing people that have come in illegally who do not have the right to stay in our country. And having a firm and fair expectation of our immigration law is important, but also knowing that there are going to be circumstances like that of Liu Yang or others that maybe deserve a different set of consideration that ought to be looked at. And I think if we can have broader immigration conversations, I don't shy away from that. But I think we have to restore
Congressman, what is the line
in America?
What is the line that you draw, Congressman? What's the line that you draw?
Well, certainly no American citizens ought to be, ensnared in immigration enforcement and deported or anything like that. But I also think that if we have a broader context conversation about immigration enforcement, that's perfectly fine. But again, we need to remember that people have violated the sovereignty of our borders and our immigration law. You can't have a country if you don't have borders, and it should be fair and reasonable that we expect that we're going to enforce those laws and enforce those borders. Otherwise, they are meaningless. And I think that we have to do that in an appropriate way. And if there are broader reforms that are necessary, that is a role for Congress to have. But we first have to restore the trust of the American people that we are actually enforcing our immigration law. And that trust has been violated for far too long in our country. So we need to restore that confidence before having a broader look at how we can make more substantive changes to immigration law. But certainly I expect a fair process to be followed. And I think that's the appropriate way to go about it.
Michigan Republican Congressman Tom Barrett, thank you so much for joining me today on the Metro.
Thank you again.
It's the Metro on WDET. Up next, we shift from the case of Liu Yang to the story of Ernesto Cuevas Enciso, a former DACA recipient with legal work authorization and a pending green card application who's now detained by ICE. His sister Miriam is with us. We'll be right back on the Metro. Stay with us.